Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah wa salatu wa salama ala ashrafu anbiya wa mursaleen. Sayyidina wa habibina al-Mustafa Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Wa min tabi'ahum bi ihsani ila yawm ad-din wa ba'd. Can you hear me, sis? Yeah, type in the chat box if you can hear. I just want to make sure you can hear. Yeah, you there, sis? Okay, it's 7:01. Give a couple more minutes for some people to join, inshallah ta'ala. All right. Yeah, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Yeah, how you doing, sis? Can you hear?
I hear you fine.
Okay, alhamdulillah. How you doing?
Ah, Tahir, alhamdulillah.
Okay, alhamdulillah. We're just going to give a few more moments for some other people to join, inshallah. But if not, we'll be proceeding. Were you able to view the first class?
No, I missed the first class.
Okay, yeah, all the recordings are on YouTube. I think I shared it with the group, but you can go to our YouTube channel and look for this title, The Creed Made Easy.
All right, inshallah, I'll check that out when we're done today.
Okay, inshallah. Okay, how you been?
Great, great, great. Dealing with this social distancing thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, may Allah make it
weird.
Easy. Yeah, may Allah make it easy. I mean.
How are you and the family?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, we holding on, alhamdulillah, no complaints.
Alhamdulillah.
No complaints. Trying to get back into the full swing of things, you know?
Yes, I understand totally.
Okay. So did you have any difficulty signing in or?
No, it was quite simple.
Okay. You didn't need no password, right?
No, I just pressed on the link.
Yeah, good. Alhamdulillah. I disabled the need for a password. Okay. All right. So if you're in the area when we start, we're gonna be recording this. So if you're in the area that has any noise in the background, just mute your mic and then you can unmute it if you need to ask a question or anything.
All right, will do.
Okay. Couple more minutes and then we'll start. And thanks for joining too. I appreciate it.
No, I need that spiritual.
Yeah, we're gonna put some spirituality in this class, but this is gonna be the aqli class. But we're gonna do something. But Friday night is the one where we're doing the spiritual discourses, inshallah.
Inshallah.
And that's gonna be from 7 to 8.
All right. So all the classes are around the same time?
Yeah, all on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7 to 8. Then I got another one on Sunday. It's going to be called require memorization, and I prefer to do that one in person, but we'll see. We'll see, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Okay, Tayyib. Okay, we'll get started then, inshallah.
I'm ready.
Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulihi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Wa min tabi'ahum bi ihsani ila yawm ad-din wa ba'd. Okay, I'd like to welcome you all to the Creed Made Easy class. It's called Al-Aqida Al-Maysara. We're going to be covering just the basic requirements, what is necessary for a person to know with regard to their belief. All right, so I got an attendee today. I didn't have any last week, so if there are any people who come in, we're going to be reviewing first of all. So right now we're going to have a little review, Sister Stephanie, before we get started. All right, so some of the stuff you might know. All right, All right. So the review from last week, you say you didn't get a chance to watch it, but you can go back. But we get the screen to come up. Come on. Okay, so I'll ask you some of these things, see if you can answer. So, what is the meaning of deen? We covered that last week.
Mm. The meaning of deen.
Mm-hmm.
No,
No
don't
right or
recall.
wrong answer. Just no right or wrong answer.
I know my answer is it's the habits and behavior of Islam.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty good. But basically, the meaning of deen as our religion, all right?
Mm-hmm.
The deen of Islam is the religion of Islam. All right. And we mentioned last week that deen comes from an Arabic word dana or dana, which means to have a debt, to be indebted to something. So with respect to the religion of Islam, it is a system of us being in debt to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for everything he has done for us and he has allowed for us and he has favored us with. And it's a system of us repaying that debt, basically. All right.
All right.
So we kind of covered that last week. And because we mentioned last week, when you talk about religion doesn't really cover the meaning of deen. All right.
Mm.
For instance, if you look up the word religion, it says something about beliefs or something, and the definition that we gave last week, I'll cover real quick here. It says the code of divine laws which Allah has chosen for His servants, governing the rights and which is the rights of worship, ibadah that's due to Him, and a code of conduct in dealing with each other. It is the heavenly way which guides every person of the sound mind to the path of goodness, and whoever chooses it and is content with it gains happiness in the life and the hereafter. That's way different from the meaning of religion.
Mm.
So, but that's a deep meaning. The deen, religion will connect you to some beliefs, a set of principles. But deen will connect you to Allah. So when we say deen, it's way more than religion. So we covered the meaning of deen.
Mm-hmm.
Then we said the three pillars of the deen. What are the three pillars of the deen that when we talk about? Just take a guess.
The three pills of the deen.
Mm-hmm.
Prayer.
No, you talking about the five? You talking about five
Oh,
pillars?
okay. The five pillars. All right. Mm. All right. Refresh my memory.
Okay, we talked about three pillars of deen, which comprises of Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. So
Right.
Islam, we know, is the meaning of the religion of Islam. All
Mm-hmm.
right, and that covers which Islam means what? What does Islam mean?
Islam is a way of life.
Okay, yeah, but a technical meaning.
A
'Cause-
technical meaning
yeah,
of
because we just
Islam.
we just mentioned um, that Islam, is a system.
Right.
But just another meaning that I want to see if you know.
Oh, you're asking me another meaning of Islam?
Yeah. Yeah, there's no right or wrong. If you don't.
Let's see. Another meaning of Islam other than a way of life as behaviors.
Yeah. Well, technically, it means submission to the
Mission.
rulings of submission to the
Right.
rulings of the law which have been revealed to His messenger. So that's the pill. That's what Islam means. Okay. What does Iman mean?
Faith.
Okay, we usually translate it as faith, but the meaning we gave last week is acceptance from the heart of Allah as Lord and the religion of Islam, as Islam is the religion, the Quran as the criterion, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a prophet and messenger. So that's a complete meaning of Iman. So faith is one word, but well, to get deep into it, that's the meaning of iman. And then what is the meaning of ihsan? That's the third pillar. Islam, iman, and ihsan.
It's I can't even take a guess. Wow.
Okay, so ihsan means to do something with perfection, to do
Okay.
something good, to do something well. And it means technically to worship Allah as though you see him. And if you don't see him, then know for sure that he sees you. All right. And the three pillars of Islam, Iman, and Ihsan can be found in the Hadith. Do you know the name of the Hadith?
No, no, I don't know the name of the Hadith.
Okay. All right. We're just doing a review. So the name of the Hadith is called the Hadith of Jibril. The Hadith of Jibril. Are you familiar with this Hadith?
Please repeat it so I'll know.
The Hadith of Jibril is a Hadith. I think it's the second or third one that's collected in the 40 Hadith of Imam Nawawi. You know about the 40 Hadith, right?
40 Hadith, yes.
And then the Hadith that mentions where a man had came to the Prophet ﷺ one day. He was with his companions. He came to him and he said, what is Islam? He asked him what was Islam. The Prophet ﷺ told him the 5 pillars. And then he said, you have spoken truthfully. You familiar with this Hadith?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
This is the name of the Hadith of Jibril. That's what it's called, because that man who came, as you know, was the angel Jibril, alayhi salam. He came in the form of a man to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And one of the things that we mentioned last week, that he had came to teach the companions of religion. All right. So when he left, Umar ibn al-Khattab, who relayed the hadith, he said they waited for some time, and then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had came to them and said, do you know who that questioner was? And they said, Allah and his messenger know best. And he said, that was the angel Jibril. He came to teach you your religion. So in that hadith, which is pretty long, it talks about Islam, Iman, and Ihsan, and it gives definitions. So the meaning of the 3 pillars, Islam is the 5 pillars, Iman is the 6 articles of faith, and Ihsan is to do things well, to worship Allah as though you see him. And of course, if you were able to see Allah, which you can't see Allah, then you would perfect your worship. You would do everything correctly. And knowing that you can't see him, know that he sees you, and that if you're under, surveillance from Allah, then it should prompt you to do things right. All right. All right. So that was reviewed. Then we mentioned 2 types of obligations. Do you know the 2 types of obligations that are upon a person?
All right. Zakat.
No. Zakat is all part of it, but then there's something specifically that I'm looking for.
All right.
No right or wrong answer,
I know it's worship.
Yeah, worship. Yeah, but I'm looking for 2 things that is as an obligation on each individual and also as the community. Well, since you didn't review the stuff, I'll tell you. All right, so there's 2 types of obligations. It's called Fard Ain and Fard Kifaya. Have you heard of these terms before?
Yes, I've heard of them.
Okay, what is Fard Ain?
I've heard of them, but I don't recall.
Okay, Fard Ain is an individual obligation. So we mentioned that Fard Ain is that each person who is known as what's called mukallaf, when they reach the age of responsibility. And the age of responsibility is when, for a male, he either has a wet dream, he grows pubic hairs, or he reaches the age of 15. And for a female, when they come on their cycle, they have reached the age of responsibility, which they become mukallaf, meaning that they become responsible for the knowledge that they have to know and an individual. And also for Fard Ain, that a person they have to be sane, they have to have their senses, and the proper message of Islam has to reach them. All right. So that's for each and every, this knowledge that we learn in each person who is mukallaf and they meet those criterions, that is wajib. It is a fard obligation for them to know this knowledge. All right. And then the other one is fard kifaya, which means it's a communal obligation. All right. So for example, fard ayn is the salat. Every person who reaches the age of accountability that reaches those categories that we mentioned, they have to know the rulings of the salat. They have to know them in and out, and they have to know them in detail. And they have to know them for themselves, and they have to know that they know them. You understand?
Yes.
Yeah, so detail. So fard kifaya means a communal obligation. And it means that someone from the community must fulfill an obligation or a collection of people from the community, of responsible people. And if they don't, then the whole community will be held accountable. An example of that is, performing janazah prayers or performing Jumu'ah prayer. That somebody from the community has to undertake that responsibility. And if one person doesn't do it, then everyone will be responsible and sharing in the sin. Right? So, and then we mentioned with fard ayn that there are 5 types of obligations under fard ayn. So when a person has an individual responsibility, the 5 things that we mentioned is that first they have to know Allah and they have to have faith in Him. This is an obligation on each and every person. They have to know the rulings of the religious rites, to worship and to practice them. They have to know the rulings of transactions, mu'alamat, how you do business, what's halal and haram, all right, that are relevant to one's life and to conduct oneself according to them. They have to know what is lawful and what is unlawful, established by the Islamic law, the Sharia, so they may observe the limits, and they have an obligation to purify one's soul. So purifying our souls from evil vices and caprices is an obligation on the individual person. And so then we mentioned 5 legal rulings that each act of worship falls under. So do you know those 5 legal rulings? This would be before we continue.
Would you please give them to me?
No, I'm asking, do you know first?
No, I don't recall.
Okay, so the 5 legal rulings in Islamic law, that each ruling will fall under one of these categories. So the first one is wajib, or sometimes defined as fard. And this is a legal obligatory action that Allah has demanded, and the servant will be rewarded for doing them and punish them for not doing them. All right. I want to get on with some of this class. So this review here, I want you to go back to the first recording from last week, and you can review this stuff, but this is what we review. So you should know the meaning of deen, the 3 pillars of deen, the meaning of the 3 pillars of deen, the name of the hadith that we talked about, 2 types of obligation, and who is the obligation on, meaning the mukallaf. You should know what mukallaf means and what makes a person mukallaf. All right?
I'll be sure to.
Huh?
I'll be sure to listen to that.
Okay, the 5 types and 1 obligation and 5 legal rulings. All right. So I want to move on with the class.
Great.
Okay, so now this part of the class, we're talking about in the book that we're using, Aqida al-Maysara, that the next section is called Rational Judgements. All right, let me go back. We call rational judgments. All right, so rational judgments in Arabic is called al-hukm al-aqli. All right, so that's what the translation, rational judgments. So what we mean by rational judgments is that it's an obligation for a person to know what rational judgment means. Because how do you learn knowledge? You have to know it through either your senses, through your intellect, or through reports that are sahih, meaning like from revelation and the like. All right. So, and then when you get that knowledge, you have to make a rational judgment concerning it. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So what is rational judgment? The first term that one should know is al-wajib. Wajib means what is rationally necessary, meaning that something that you absolutely must know. And when you know it, the existence can only be affirmed, and whose negation and non-existence is unacceptable to the sound intellect. An example of that is Allah's existence, meaning that you have to affirm, it is an obligation to affirm Allah's existence, and negating Allah's existence and and non-existence is unacceptable to the sound intellect. So what that means is that it's not rational to think that all of this stuff that we know in creation doesn't have a creator. All right. So it is wajib to affirm that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he exists, he created all this. And then it is unacceptable to the sound intellect to believe that Allah doesn't exist or to negate his existence. You know? So it doesn't make sense to look at all of this in creation and think it didn't have a creator, and then to think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is non-existent. All right. Is that clear? All right. So that is something that is, when we make rational judgment, this is called that you have to have a rational judgment that is wajib, that this is necessary. An example of what's necessary for you to make the proper judgment is that you have to affirm something, all right? And you can't negate it, and its non-existence is unacceptable. So it's unacceptable to rationalize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't exist, because there are people who do it. You know, there are people who are atheists, who people don't believe in anything, you know, and this is unacceptable to the sound intellect, all right? Okay, the second thing, so there are three categories of what's rational judgment. Something that will be wajib, that will be necessary. The next term is something that will be mustahil, means that it will be impossible. And what would be by mustahil, impossible, is that the negation is conceivable and affirmation is unacceptable. All right. So, and its existence is unacceptable to the sound intellect. So an example of something that is mustahil is having a partner with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you think about it rationally, it's impossible. All right. So negating a partner with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something that's very conceivable. And affirming a partner for Allah is something that is unacceptable. It doesn't make sense to the sound judgment of the rational mind, because if Allah had a partner, like it says in the Quran, if there were more gods other than Allah, then they would have been like fighting each other. You know, so it is something that is rationally impossible for Allah to have a partner or anything to be equal or comparable to him. All right. Is that clear?
No.
Okay. And the next category will be something that is jaiz. All right. So meaning that something that is possible. And that means that anything whose existence or non-existence is equally possible, both are conceivable. So for instance, an example would be our existence as humans, meaning that it is possible that we can exist, and it's also possible that we can't exist. All right. Both of those things are possible, because some people don't come into existence, you know, and there are people who come into existence. Both of these things are jaiz, that it's rationally possible. All right. So these three categories are how you make rational judgments with respect to the creed, with respect to the belief. So when we talk about creed, we talk about belief. Some things that they will, to the rational mind, they are necessary for you to believe. All right. You understand?
Yes.
They are necessary for you to believe and affirm. All right. And if you negate them, or you believe that they're non-existent, then that's not acceptable to the sound intellect. The next category is mustahil, something that's rationally impossible, that it's possible that you can negate it, but affirming it is unacceptable. All right. And that example, it's possible that you can negate a partner with Allah, but you can't affirm that there's a partner with Allah. And existence of another partner with Allah, it doesn't make sense to the rational mind. All right. And jaiz, as we mentioned, something that is possible, its existence or non-existence is equally possible, and both are conceivable. All right. Is that clear?
No.
Okay. If there's any questions, feel free to ask. Okay. All right.
Well,
All right. When we talk about more rational judgments, then we talk about a couple more categories. So when we say rational judgments, that it is obligatory. So it is wajib upon every accountable person to know the attributes of his Lord. All right. So do you remember when we said obligatory or wajib? And the word we use for every accountable person. What is it? What is an accountable person? What are they known as?
Let's see. Checking my notes here. What is this? A rational judgment. I have Wanja, accountable person.
What's the term for an accountable person? It starts with the letter M.
Oh, no. Don't have it on here. I am. Oh, Musa Kill. No. Musa Hill. That's
No,
impossible.
no, I didn't. It wasn't in the notes right here, but
Oh,
you
okay.
mentioned it. Someone who was mukallaf.
Mukallaf.
You remember that term?
Yes.
What makes a person mukallaf?
Let's see. What makes a person?
Between the male and female, there are three things
Oh,
for a
here's the
male
three
and one
things
female.
right here. All
Huh?
right. What makes them Mukallaf? Is it when they go into puberty?
Yes, there's for a male, there's three things, and for a female, there's only one.
All right. And that's for the female. It is going. Let me see what this says. Reversible. Oh, no. All right.
As a woman, when does a woman become accountable? When
Right.
she, huh?
When she's accountable once she receives the age of puberty.
Yeah, and what? Not the
Certainly.
age of puberty, but
The physical components of puberty.
when she has a cycle.
Right. That's physical
Yeah,
components. Yeah.
right. So at that time that's when a woman becomes accountable. And there's reports that girls can have their cycles as early as 9 years old or even earlier in some cases.
Okay.
So at that time, they become accountable for knowing this information. It becomes an obligation, and it becomes the time where they have to make rational judgments concerning this knowledge of Islam. And there it is said also that when a person becomes accountable, when they reach the age of mukallaf, that's when the angels start writing their deeds down. So before that time, they're not accountable, and that's something that's very interesting if you think about the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because before the age of responsibility of being mukallaf, isn't it true that kids become more they know right from wrong before that?
Well, from my perspective, it depends on when you teach them right from wrong.
Yeah, but you have an innate nature to know right from wrong. For instance, if you walked into a room and there was something that you had hidden, right? And a little child went in there and they looked in their bag and they try to take something out of there, and you came in there and be like, "What are you doing?" Right? The child's automatic nature would be like, "I'm doing something wrong." That's what they already made a rational judgment, but they're not. You know what I'm saying? But they're not at the age of accountability. You follow what I'm saying?
No.
Right? Is that true or not?
True.
Yeah, because they have an innate nature. They have a surprised look because by what you said to them, they made a rational judgment. I already know I'm not supposed to be in this bag in this room, and now I got busted. So now this look on my face shows that I know I'm wrong. That's a rational judgment. You follow what I'm saying? And a kid can do this as how early? What, 2 years old?
No.
3, 4 years old. But at that age, they're not accountable. So think about all the stuff that a kid learns before they reach the age of accountability, and they know right from wrong, what to do and don't do. You've had cases of children at that young age raising other siblings. So
True.
but all that stuff that they know early on, how the mind can make rational judgments, but they're not accountable. So that's a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He doesn't make the accountability until certain conditions are met. So with a female is when her cycle is reached, and that just shows the remarkable nature of women. I gotta take the time to get some points because I got a sister on, plus my wife gonna be watching. You know what I mean? So that the remarkable nature of a woman is how developed they are at a very young age. Not just physically, but psychologically, they're way ahead of us, And this is another thing why women have to be patient with us men, because y'all got like one heck of a head start. Because if a woman gets her menses as early as 9, and us men, we might not be getting pubic hairs till at least average 3 or 4 years later. You know?
I understand.
Yeah. So now getting back to the class, rational judgment is on a person, every accountable person, to know the attributes, the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right. So now when we talk about the sifat, uh, we talk about the sifat of Allah. So the scholars have concluded that there are 20 necessary attributes for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we don't mean 20 that only 20. We mean 20 that are necessary for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because how many attributes does Allah have?
100.
There's an unlimited number, but there's a hadith that says Allah has 99 names. And
Right.
there's a
99
hadith
names
where
of
Prophet ﷺ said whoever memorizes these 99 names of Allah, I forget the reward, excuse me. But Allah has more than 99 names and attributes. We just have 99 as document on the names of Allah. But out of those 99, or the unlimited names and attributes, there are 20 necessary attributes, and some scholars divide this further into 13 because the whole 20, they kind of interplay with each other. They're saying that these are necessary attributes to know about Allah, and what they mean by that is that these are the attributes that are necessary for Allah to be who He is. All right. For instance, the first one that is accountable for the person to know is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What's the first thing we're supposed to know about Allah? Just this trivia
I know
question.
the first thing that comes in my mind is forgiving.
No, that's not the first thing, because forgiving is one of Allah's attributes that it is jaiz, meaning that it is possible for Allah to forgive you, but it's also not possible for Allah to forgive you. So that's not necessary for Allah to be forgiven, to be who He is. You understand what I'm saying? Like Allah can forgive you, but He also can punish you. So that's not necessary for Him to be forgiven, although He tells us that He will forgive us for any sins except shirk, right?
Right.
But what's a necessary attribute for Allah? We're going to cover them, but I'm just asking you a question to see where you're at.
Oh, not there.
Okay, well, we'll get there, inshallah. But out of the 20 necessary attributes, the first one is that it is necessary for the person who is accountable. They have to make a rational judgment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He exists. That He is mawjood. We're going to cover these. But this is necessary before Allah can forgive you, before Allah can punish you, before Allah can overlook your faults. He has to exist to do any of that. You follow what I'm saying? So the accountable person, they have to know this necessary attribute of Allah is that He exists. And there's a reward for knowing this and punishment for being ignorant of these attributes that we're going to cover.
Okay.
But it is an obligation upon an accountable person to know these attributes that we are going to cover, inshallah. All right?
Inshallah.
So, for instance, it is not an obligatory to know an attribute of Allah that you might not hear all of the time. Is that Allah is dhun tiqam. You know what dhun tiqam means?
No.
That means He is the possessor of vengeance. It is not necessary for Allah to be the possessor of vengeance in order for Him to exist. But it is necessary for Allah to have life, to have will, to have power. These are some of the necessary attributes. We're going to cover them. I don't want to go jump the gun. But all right, so there is obligatory upon the person who is accountable, mukallaf, that they have to know these 20 attributes that we're going to cover. And, for people who are listening, don't make a mistake about thinking that because some other people who follow different methodologies, they'll say that, these people, they only believe the law has 13 attributes and that's 20 attributes. And that's not true. We're talking about 20 necessary attributes that are for Allah to be who He is. It is necessary to have these attributes. All right. And so to continue, is that clear?
That's clear.
All right. So it is rationally necessary to know and accept these 20 attributes that we're going to discover. They can't be negated, and it is unacceptable for the sound intellect to affirm their non-existence. So when we get into these attributes, so we're also going to cover their opposites in another class, but right now we're covering the basic parts of Aqidah. All right. So it is unacceptable for the sound intellect to affirm their non-existence. So if we affirm and know that it is rationally necessary to know, like we mentioned, that Allah exists, that He is mawjood, it can't be negated. You can't not believe that He exists, and that it is unacceptable for the sound mind that makes rational judgments to say that the opposite exists, which is non-existence.
Mm.
The intellect won't allow you to do it, all right? And Allah is the creator of intellect, all right? And so now this last part right here is something that we should know, and I put it in bold, meaning, and when we cover these attributes, this is a principle that you should know, that the absence of them is inconceivable, and the opposite of them is impossible. What do we mean by that?
The absence is inconceivable, therefore the absence can't exist.
Right, the meaning that the absence of these 20 necessary attributes, now remember, we didn't cover them yet, but we are.
Right.
The absence of them is inconceivable, meaning it is inconceivable for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to not be existing. All right?
Right.
It is inconceivable to think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't have absolute power. It is inconceivable to think that Allah is absent of being totally independent. All right? And the opposite of them is impossible. So, for instance, one of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's necessary attributes is that He has power.
Right.
What's the opposite of power?
Weakness.
Right. It is impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be weak. And it is inconceivable to think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't have power. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. So, you follow me?
I follow you.
And this is the same concept for the other 20 necessary attributes that we're going to cover. And in the later part of the class, not only are we going to cover them, we're going to cover their opposites, and you're going to be required to memorize them.
Okay.
And we're going to go over them, so don't worry about it. But remember, these 20 necessary attributes, they are wajib on every accountable person. So for a person to know the proper Aqidah in Islam, they have to know these attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they accept all of the attributes from Allah, but the other ones you're not required to know. But for Allah to be who Allah is, and for you to know Him who He is the proper way, you have to know these attributes. Is that clear?
Clear.
Any questions?
Clear. No, I don't have any.
All right, so we'll go to the next one.
All right.
All right, so then the next one, when we talk about necessary, we already talked about al-wajib, something that is obligatory, and then we talked about the term that is mustahil, something that is rationally possible, right?
All
right, so what these means is that they're broken down into two further categories. So you got al-wajib al-aradi, and that means something that is rationally possible when you first examine its essence, but when you are informed by Allah of its occurrence, then it becomes an obligation. An example of that is the bodily resurrection on the Day of Judgment. So what we mean by that is that that's something that you can imagine being possible, but your rational mind, right?
Right.
Without any preconceived notions, you can imagine bodies being resurrected on Judgment Day. And at that time, it's not an obligation on you. But once you know that Allah has informed you in the Quran, because remember we said that Islam is, believing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the rules that Allah has sent on His messenger. So anything that we are informed about in the Quran by way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is the law. So once we become informed of its occurrence, then there's an obligation to believe it. There's no two ways about it. You follow me?
Follow you.
Okay. So we as Muslims, we believe that everybody will be resurrected in the form that they died on the day of judgment, right? So once we have informed by this in the Quran with rational proofs, then there is no excuse to not believe this. You have to believe it. And then the example of al-mustahil al-aradi is something that is rationally possible upon examination of its phenomenon. But it becomes an obligation to believe of its non-occurrence after being this is a typo. It should say after being informed by the Lord of its non-occurrence. An example is the faith of Abu Lahab. All right. So you know who Abu Lahab was, right?
No.
Huh?
No.
You said Nam?
Nope. I said no.
You said Nam or La?
La.
Okay, Abu Lahab was the uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that used to ridicule the Prophet and curse the Prophet, and his wife used to put put the intestines of camels on his walkway, and they used to really treat him bad. So it is rationally possible that Abu Lahab could have been a believer, right? Because he was the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's uncle. But
right.
now that we read in the Quran by Allah where he says, you know the surah Lahab, Tabat yada abi lahab watab. And he said, curse is Abu Lahab. Covered with dust is the hand of Lahab. All right. So that means Allah who spent without a curse him. So now that we know that this non-occurrence of him being a believer has been confirmed by what we read in the Quran, it is an obligation to believe it now. All right.
All right.
So something that might have been possible before, if you looked at it, on the surface, now it is it is a non-occurrence, meaning that it will never happen. There will never be a chance for Abu Lahab. All right. And there's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said that his uncle Abu Lahab receives the least punishment in hellfire, and it is a punishment that the fire that will reach your feet that will make your brains boil.
All right.
All right. So now there's no chance because the surah in the Quran, Tabat yada abi lahab watab. All right. That's surah 111. If you go read that surah and the tafsir of it. All right. So those two examples. Any questions?
I'm good. Okay.
So now we have we're going to talk about knowledge and faith. And you know the Arabic word for faith already, right? Yeah, when I ask you what is
drawing blanks.
huh?
I'm like drawing all kind of blanks here. I don't know.
Yeah, Iman is translated as faith.
Right.
Now, in this section, the Sheikh says knowledge. He uses the word ma'rifah. What's the word for knowledge that you know?
The word for knowledge. Don't
Arabic
draw.
word for knowledge.
Is it Arabic word or just?
Yeah. What does knowledge mean in Arabic?
Don't have that thought in my head either.
Ilm.
Him.
When you learn an ilm, that's when you learn knowledge. But here, the Sheikh says he used the word ma'rifah. Ma'rifah. It's pronounced ma'rifah. Ma'rifah is the certainty of something which corresponds with reality and is substantiated by evidence. This is the definition that he gives in the book. Ma'rifah, knowledge is the certainty of something which corresponds with reality and is substantiated by evidence. And faith, we already said, that is acceptance from the heart of Allah, acceptance from your heart that of Allah as being Lord. Islam is the religion, and the Quran as the criterion, and the Prophet Muhammad Sayyiduna sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he is the prophet and messenger. And of course, we know that faith is something that you have to affirm in your heart. You have to have tasdeeq, then you have to make a statement on your tongue, and then you have to practice it outwardly with your body limbs. All right. So that is the real meaning of faith. All right.
Okay.
All right.
Got it.
So he used the word ma'rifah, and it's interesting he didn't use ilm. All right, because ma'rifah basically has a meaning of realization or definiteness. All right. So meaning that when you know something, you know what you know, and you know there's no two ways about it. All right. In Arabic, when we have something in the Arabic grammar, you have something that's called ma'rifah and nakira. It means something that is definite and something that is indefinite. Something that is definite is known as ma'rifah. But knowledge here, when it relates to creed, is that you have to not only know what you're supposed to know, you're supposed to have a deep realization that you know what you know and you're certain about it. So when we talk about the creed, we talk about Aqidah, it is account for how it all relates is that each person who is mukallaf or reached the age of responsibility or accountability, they have to know what they know.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to be certain about it. All right. So this is the first step. All right. So it's interesting he used the word ma'rifah instead of ilm. All right. Then he says that knowledge is not the same as faith. Faith comes after knowledge. But it is possible to have knowledge without having faith. All right. An example he gives is the Quran, ayah in Surah Al-Ankabut, Surah ayah 14 says, and they rejected them while their inner selves were convinced thereof, out of injustice, dhulman, and haughtiness, uluwan. All right. So this is a proof from the Quran that a person may know something and be convinced, but they might not have faith in it. What's another example that you could think of? There's something of having knowledge but not having faith.
Something that having faith. Let's say.
How about the shaitan?
Right. I was going to go with the afterlife. You can believe that you can know that there is an afterlife, but you don't have the belief that you will be in the afterlife.
Yeah,
Like
knowing about it is one thing. If you know
right,
about it, if you don't have
believing is
ma'rifah, like
another.
a realization,
Mm-hmm.
that definite is about it, then it's just information that you're learning. All right.
Right.
And you read many examples, during the time of the Prophet Sallallahu that the Arabs, they used to say they knew that Allah was God, right? But
Right.
they didn't have ma'rifah,
Mm-hmm.
right? They
Mm-hmm.
didn't have ma'rifah, and so they couldn't have faith if they didn't have ma'rifah, all right?
Right.
So
Okay.
faith comes after knowledge and not the other way around. So you can't have faith and then have knowledge, all right? So
All right.
another
You have
thing,
to know it first to
faith
believe
cannot
in it.
come before knowledge. I meant to put knowledge, but not action. Faith
Mm-hmm.
cannot come before knowledge. Why?
Because you have to have knowledge or to have faith.
Okay. What's your example? What's your proof for that?
My proof, are you talking about quoting hadith?
Well, yeah, ayah from the Quran, just something,
Let's say. How about personal experience?
Okay.
I have faith.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, why do you have faith?
I have faith.
Do you have faith? Do you have faith without knowing something?
Ah, okay. Got your point. Got your point.
All right.
I
So this thing,
know.
yeah, you have to know something to
I
have faith in it.
know. Okay.
So,
Okay.
and this is the example from the Quran. It says, "So know Muhammad, fa'alam." Allah uses a command, "Fa'alam annahu la ilaha illallah wastaghfir li dhanbik." He says, and know Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that there is no God except Allah or no deity, and ask for forgiveness for your sins. So this is the first order of business before a person can become knowledge, become Muslim. They have to have knowledge of who Allah is, and they have, and Allah says in the command form, "Fa'alam," know, meaning for certainty, know that there is no God except Allah. And once you accept that, then you negate the opposite of it, which is shirk. You understand? So
Understood.
you can't have faith until you know that for surety that there is no God except Allah. And that is why when a person takes Shahada in Islam, the first thing they have to know, and like we mentioned in the earlier part of the class, that a person has the proper message of Islam has had to reach them. So they have to know the proper knowledge of what La ilaha illallah means. And so we're going to cover that in detail. Okay, I want to roll through because the time is going.
All
Was there
right.
any questions on that?
I'm clear.
Okay. All right. So now here's another important point that I wanted to cover. We talked about the accountable person, which is what? It's called what?
The accountable person.
Yeah. When a person has puberty or menses or they
Right,
reach
right.
what is the name of that person?
The accountable person.
Yeah. In Arabic, it's called the what?
Let me see. No, that's not it. Is it? No, I have it on my notes, but
Remember we were talking about the person who reaches the age of responsibility or accountability.
right.
They're called what?
Is that not Mr. Hill? Yeah,
No. Mukallaf.
Mukallaf.
Mukallaf. All right.
Yeah.
So we're talking about here the accountable person, which is the mukallaf, and the blind follower is the mukallid. All right.
Right.
So now the accountable person is mukallaf, we already mentioned, is any individual that has reached the age of puberty, who is sane, has sound senses, and has received the proper message of Islam. That is what makes a person mukallaf. Puberty, for boys is three things.
Right.
Semen emission, wet dream, pubic
Yeah.
hairs, or the age of 15, whichever one of those come first. And for a female, it's the cycle. They have to be clean. They can't be crazy, right? And they have to have sound senses like hearing and sight, or if they don't have their hearing or seeing, that their other senses will take place, that they understand and they're capable of processing information, and they have received the proper message of Islam. All right. So that is the person who is mukallaf. All right. So now we talk about the one who is mukallid, the blind follower. The meaning of mukallid is the one who makes taqlid, or who follows the judgment of another without the responsibility of research and understanding. All right. So have you ever heard this term before, taqlid?
No.
Huh?
No, I probably have, but don't recall.
Yeah, taqlid, they translate it as blind following, and the one who is mukallid is a blind follower. So a technical meaning of it is trusting the judgment of a researcher without knowing the evidence. All right. So a person, they can be mukallid and they can be mukallaf, right?
Right.
Now we have to go into this meaning of what taqlid is, because there's a big misconception about taqlid, because you hear people say that blind following is haram, right? That you can't blind follow anyone, all right? So taqlid comes from the word qalada, which means to adorn with a necklace. A necklace in Arabic is called kilada, right? So another meaning of this word taqlid or qalada, which means to put the thing that they put on a horse or a donkey. What's that thing that go around their neck?
Harness, isn't it? On a donkey, that yoke.
A yoke or a gird, G-I-R-D. It's called a gird or a yoke. And you put it around the animal, and you guide the animal to wherever you wanted to go.
Right.
That is a meaning of taqlid. So when we think about it in that respect, if you think about a person, all right, the meaning of taqlid, it doesn't really mean blind following. And this is the meaning that we should have of taqlid that I put. It means imitation. I spelled that wrong. Imitation or copying.
Okay.
Not blind following, because blind following is almost like you don't know what's going on and you just accept it. But it should mean you imitation or you copying, or in the Islamic term sense, it's taking knowledge from people of authority in knowledge that you trust.
All right.
All right.
Yeah.
Let me go back to that.
Okay.
Let me go back to that. Let me go back to that screen. Hold on. Go back to that screen. All right, and there's something I want to explain here with blind following, because you'll hear this term. People say this term, blind following, and you'll hear from some people who follow different methodology that is haram. But a good example of what blind following is if you went on a tour, right? Say you went to Disney World and they had a tour to, Epoch Center or something. You know how they had those tour buses and a lot of tourists come on, and the tour guide, they tell you everything that you need to know, where you go at, what's the attractions, right?
No, I understand.
When you go on a tour bus, do you ask the person what's their qualifications?
Let me take it for granted.
Huh? No, you listen to the person, because if that person is there, he's recognized as the person of authority, and if you're on a tour, you have to trust him.
Right.
You don't, because you don't know what's going on. You didn't do the research. You don't know the area, so you got to trust that person's judgment. So taqlid is something that's permissible, right? Because we hear this term about from some people that they say taqlid, blind following, is haram, and it's not haram. It is. So they have to know the meaning of what taqlid means. It means taking knowledge or imitating knowledge from people who you trust. And why not in religion if you do it in other things? If you go to the doctor and the doctor says he's the expert, right? And he says, okay, you need to lose weight. I'm going to prescribe you to this, that, and the other. You take this 3 times a day, such and such, and then you come back in a month and we'll see the results. Do you ask that doctor, what's his proof for that?
No, we take it for granted that he does know because he's the doctor.
You assume that he knows what he's talking about, and you trust him because he's the person of authority. He's the one that you chose to go to because you trust that he has the knowledge. He's going to tell you right. It's the same thing in deen. We're talking about people in the religion of Islam who some of the Sahabas, they were scared to even relate. You didn't hear hadith from some of them until they reached their deathbed. And that was because they didn't want to meet Allah knowing that they didn't relate knowledge that they knew.
Okay.
So if you have people like that relating this kind of knowledge, don't you think that that these people that are worthy that you follow?
No.
That you don't have to know, because when a person is mukallad, as the meaning says here, that you don't have the responsibility of research and understanding. So you have to go to the people who have been charged with the responsibility of researching and tell you what's right. Don't do this and don't do that. And those are the scholars and the ulama. And so taqlid is not something that people are presenting today that means blind following. The proper meaning of it mean to come for imitation or copying somebody that you trust in knowledge. And the next slide will be the last one and give more clarification, which is the ruling on taqlid. All right. So the Sheikh says in his book, he says, for the one who blindly follows, who firmly believes in all the articles of faith that correspond with reality without any proof, this person is a mukallid. But he says he or she is considered a believer, but an unrighteous one if he has the capacity to reflect upon the evidence. So what he means here is what the Ahl Sunnah, what we believe, that blind following is allowed in issues of fiqh and ahkam, but not in aqidah. Blind following is allowed in issues of fiqh, but not aqidah. So meaning that in issues of fiqh, if you need to know the ruling on something, if you go to your imam or your sheikh or your scholar and you ask the ruling, and if he gives you the ruling on it, he doesn't necessarily give you the proof, then that is sufficient for you as a mukallid, because you don't have the ability to research and investigate for yourself. So you are a mukallid in this sense that you got to go to a person you trust because you don't know, right?
True.
And there is no harm in that. You don't have, this popular notion that, you hear people saying that you're supposed to ask the person of knowledge for proof. And if you have to ask if you have to ask for proof, that's an example of your inability to understand the subject anyway. You know what I'm saying? So it is not upon you to ask your sheikh for proof in rulings of ahkam. But what the sheikh in the top part, he mentions that a person is a believer if they blind follow. He's talking about an aqidah because it's not permissible for you to blind follow someone in aqidah. Meaning that when we talk about aqidah or creed or belief, you have to know for yourself, and you have to know the rulings, you have to know the evidences, you have to know the details about aqidah, because that is an individual obligation. It is not an individual obligation for you as a muqallid to know the rulings or the proof for everything that you do. Like for instance, if you got a teacher who teaches you how to make wudu, and he teaches you how to make wudu from his school of thought, from his madhab, and you follow him in that, that is okay. You don't have to ask him for proof. You shouldn't ask him for proof. It's disrespectful, actually. Right? You follow him because he's the one that you trust in knowledge. But when it comes in Aqidah, you have to know the proofs, and the person that's teaching Aqidah has to tell you the proofs. Or you follow? You see the difference?
Dude, no.
So when we talk about creed, this ruling about taqlid that the Sheikh mentions, when he says that a person is a believer, but they are unrighteous one if he has the capacity to reflect upon the evidence. So the only way that you don't know the proofs for yourselves in Aqidah is if you don't have the capacity, something you can't comprehend, then you have to trust a person of knowledge. But other than that, in Aqidah, you have to know what you have to know in Aqidah for yourself. Like you can't do it by hearsay. It can't be a lecture that you heard and it sounded like they were talking the truth. No, you have to know, like if somebody asks you as a Muslim, what is the proof for Allah's existence? Even as a muqallid, you have to know in Aqidah where you can find that in the Quran. You have to know the details, all right? And if you don't know, you have to be accessible to a person who can tell you, and they have to provide you with the proof. That's in Aqidah. But in Ahkam, if you learn a ruling about a business transaction, if say if you go to a scholar or sheikh, and you say, Sheikh, what is the ruling on this, such and such, and the sheikh says, okay, this is permissible, this is not permissible. He is not obligated to give you the proof, and you're not obligated to ask. He's the sheikh for a reason. I mean, you can ask him for the proof to get further understanding, and most scholars, they will give you the proof anyway. But it's not obligatory upon you to be responsible for knowing the proof for those situations with respect to fiqh. But in Aqidah, you have to know. Is that clear?
Clear.
Okay, you have any questions? Because I try to make these classes about an hour, so I'm a little over the time.
I appreciate that. The only questions I have, is there any way that I can actually get the slideshows?
Yeah, I can email you the slideshows.
All right.
Yeah, I can email you the slideshows, and I can. All right,
That
but
way,
I email you the slideshows, and you will need to go over the first lesson. All right.
I got it.
Because I'm going to be quizzing you on some of these things. So the first lesson, and then I got another sheet I'll email to you that gives a summary of what we covered in the first lesson. So the things that you need to know. And then we'll review this lesson next week before we go into the next lesson. So it'll always be reviewed. Then we go to information, then the summary. All right. So because this is the creed, remember? And the creed is an obligation. It's wajib on every accountable person. So the stuff that we're covering here, you have to know for yourself. You can't call a sister and be like, okay, what's this about creed? And they tell you something. They have to know what they're talking about, and you have to know that they know what they're talking about. You follow what I'm saying?
No.
Okay. All right. So are there any questions?
No. I'm good.
Okay, so we will conclude this session today, inshallah. We hope Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it beneficial. So again, and for those who will be watching the recording, be sure, if you haven't already, to go back and check the first recording from last week. And along with this recording, if anybody else will need the slides, inshallah, to review, I'll email them to you. And if anybody has any questions, you can hit me up on the email, and I'll try to. Or if you have my number, you can text me, inshallah, and I'll try to answer them. So with that, we'll conclude. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our efforts. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Shukran, Zakaria.
Afwan.